Hello, and welcome to the Paging Dr. Cohen podcast with your host, Dr. Gordon Cohen, MD, PhD, MBA.
And so my goal is to make medicine as understandable as possible. No funny language, no complicated verbiage, just plain old conversation.
Let's call in the doctor.
Paging Dr. Cohen.
This is Seattle's Morning News. Dave Ross with Colleen O'Brien and Chris Sullivan. As you may have heard, Ireland has suspended use of the AstraZeneca vaccine because of reports of blood clots. Let's call in the doctor.
Paging Dr. Cohen.
Dr. Gordon Cohen, MD. Dr. Cohen, how serious is this?
This AstraZeneca vaccine, which is not yet approved in the United States, but has been widely approved in Europe. They've actually administered it to 17 million people over there. But they've had now reports of 22 cases of patients who've developed either what's called deep venous thrombosis, which is blood clots forming usually in the legs or the pelvis, and or pulmonary embolism, which means that the blood clot breaks off and goes to the blood vessel to the lungs. You know, this has generated a lot of concern. And as a result, some of the countries are actually saying, well, we're putting a ban or a halt on using the AstraZeneca vaccine. Now, the fact of the matter is that there is a certain incidence of deep venous thrombosis and pulmonary embolism within society normally anyway. And actually, in the vaccinated population, it's occurring at a lower rate than it would otherwise normally occur in the general population. So it's a little hard to understand how this became such a tremendous concern when, in fact, it's occurring at a rate less than what would otherwise occur in the general population. Having said that, I think there's this sort of temporal relationship between people getting the vaccine and then suddenly having this problem and saying that the two are related.
I remember that when the CDC first released some of the statistics after the general release of the other two vaccines, three vaccines actually, I was getting statistics quoted to me from listeners who said, did you know the CDC found that a number of people had died after receiving these other vaccines? And so I looked it up and sure enough, that was true, but it was again, below the background rate that you would expect of people just to die naturally.
That's the thing is people are going to have natural occurring events no matter what. And it just so happens that they had gotten the vaccine and then they want to relate the two, but they're not necessarily related. You know, AstraZeneca has come out with a statement discussing this relationship of the risk relative to the general population. And in fact, there's less deep venous thrombosis and less pulmonary embolus in the vaccinated group than there is in the general population. In their study in the control group versus the vaccinated group, there was a very, very, very small difference where the treatment group had a slightly higher incidence of venous thrombosis. And so it wasn't enough to be statistically significant, but it was enough to raise an eyebrow so that when these reports started coming out, it caused widespread concern.
And it feeds into the idea of this vaccine hesitancy that some people have displayed. And you recently got yourself a beard trim, I understand. And
it's a funny
got
story.
peppered with questions about this.
Yeah, I was in the barber shop getting my beard trimmed, and I was wearing scrubs. They all know I'm a doctor, and there was, a number of other guys waiting to get their haircut or beard trimmed or whatever. And so they started asking me questions about the vaccine. And the interesting thing was there was about 10 guys in there, including the barbers who work there. And I was the only one in there that had gotten a vaccine. Now, that's not really surprising. However, none of them wanted to get the vaccine. They all had some reason why they weren't going to get the vaccine. But the most common reason was that, well, we don't know what the vaccine is going to do. And we don't know if it's going to make us infertile, or we don't know if it's going to make, our arm fall off, or who knows what. Wow. I mean, a whole list of ludicrous things. But the reality is that they were concerned about getting the vaccine. So I think when we talk about the supply of the vaccine, that's great. We're working on ramping up the amount of supply of vaccine that we have, but we still have to focus a lot on education and advocacy to get people out there to actually get the vaccine, because that's ultimately what will get us out of at least the short term with this pandemic.
Dr. Fauci came out and said it would help if President Trump himself started, recommending that people take the vaccine. Did you agree with him?
I do agree with that. And what's surprising to me is that he really started this whole Operation Warp Speed and got things really rolling and pushed through this major scientific success that you would think that given his personality, he would want to be promoting this like crazy. But certainly, as Dr. Fauci said, it would sure make a difference, I think, given his popularity with a large swath of the American public. If he said, hey, go out there and get the vaccine, it would make a difference.
Dr. Gordon Cohen, MD. Dr. Cohen, thank you very much.
Thanks, Dave.
If you enjoyed this episode of the podcast, please tell a friend, rate, comment, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Stay up to date on Twitter by using the handle Paging Dr. Cohen, or simply send us an email with any comments or medical questions to podcast@pagingdrcohen.com. This podcast also supports the American Heart Association. Please visit heart.org and consider giving a contribution by clicking the Donate Now button in the top right corner. Thanks again for listening, and stay safe.